Alrighty, so let's do our next item, which is the last item of the week, which is U-code checkpoint. So we did an AI checkpoint, and now we're going to do U-code checkpoint. So this is going to be a discussion and a code challenge or a checkpoint together. So I'm going to come into this item. So this item is a U-code challenge, as I said before. Pro tip here, working ahead, and you've heard me say this maybe by now a couple of times, but if you run into bugs, and you most likely will, it's just part of coding, working ahead gives you a buffer to reach out for help. So remember, you have support. The tutors, my office hours, Discord server, we're all here for you. Now, the other thing about this is only use code that we've already covered in the course. Bringing in code that hasn't been covered is generally flagged for AI use. And I do have at the end of this assignment, so I'll just scroll down, AI policy use discouraged, right? To truly learn these concepts, you actually need to write this code yourself. And if you use AI assistants, you are required to include the prompts you used in your submission post to see how you arrived at a solution. Okay, but first, definitely try it on yourself, on your own. Reach out for help. If help's not available to you, and you do end up turning to here, but again, try it on your own, because here's the deal. Many students from last semester told me they wish I had done this kind of thing sooner. So that's why I'm doing it. Because the sooner you code, because coding along with me, great, okay? Perfect. But you need to actually code. So what are we going to do? So we're actually going to take where we ended in 2.2. So here's where we ended with 2.2. Okay, where we actually then, this looks like I had a breakpoint. So this is really good because I talked about in attendance learning how to use DevTools, right? And this is why using DevTools can be important, because what I can do is I set the, and I didn't even show you this, but I'm pretty sure by now I have, and if I just let this run, so let me actually show you again. So if I wanted to set a breakpoint at this point, now I would have to actually do something to make the breakpoint active. And because that is inside of a function, and that function is part of the DOM loader, right? I actually have to click here in order to activate that, and now I can step through code. The sooner you step through code, the better your life's going to be overall, okay? So this is where we ended up on 2.2, okay? So in this example, I actually have an instruction file that I already have up, so you can bring it up as well, right? So we're going to refactor that click, right? So that, who's in the house, right? And that just tracking the clicks and then changing the text based on the number. Okay, so we're going to take that code, and I'll show you, just give you more precise information how to do that in a minute. Okay, and we're going to refactor it, which really means modify it to create a shopping cart calculator. Okay, I'll show you what it looks like. The final product will actually look like this. So in this case, I've changed the content. I have a current cost. This is just adding $15. Okay, so you can see it's accumulating, and when it hits 60 here, then it changes that content. Okay, so we keep going, we keep going. All right, so you get the basic idea. It's not a huge amount of change, but it is good to see how well you can take the code we ended with and modify it. Okay, so here's a scenario, right? The client loves the button interaction that you built, right, with the click counter, but they need a checkout system. They provided the HTML and with different names, right? So in this case, you'll see this in a minute. Your job is to update the JavaScript to match the new HTML and logic, okay? So in your public repo, right? So we've been working in your private repo, right? So in your public repo, create a new folder. We did week 1 for who's in the house in week 1. So now we're going to do W2 at that same level. Okay, matter of fact, I will just show you real quick. Here's what I did, right? So here's in my pub, here was week 1, and now I created here. And maybe I'll just make this a little bigger, because I'm obviously not going to show you my code, but it's good to show you that in your, and I end up having both my public and my private, but you could open them individually. But if you're on CodeSpace, then you have to open one or the other. So in here, you would create here a new folder, and then under here, you bring over the HTML and bring over the app.js. So when we ended the 2, Here, we ended up having you create a different app for that 2.1. So only bring over the app.js here, okay, and then the CSS. Okay, so once you do that, okay, so then you're going to replace the body. So here's your new body here, okay? So that's your new body in the HTML, okay? So copy that over. You're going to replace what's there, right? Once done, review it carefully. Confirm the IDs match what you have here, right? Save the file, right? Refresh the browser and ensure no errors. And before moving on, right, commit with step 1 complete. I'm trying to remember if I got any errors here with just doing that. Okay, so now refactor your JavaScript. So you're currently looking for old IDs and using old variable names. You need to fix it. So here's, some content for what you need to do, right? It's looking for output message. So now you have new IDs. You have to update them. Tip: you should also rename your variables to match here. Okay. Checkpoint, make sure you have, now by the way, these checkpoints are not corresponded to the colons, or just each step here. Actually, I should have formatted those a little better to make them clear, but they work. Okay, so make sure there's no null errors, click, make sure it triggers, and then move on and commit, right? So when it says commit, that's when you're doing the git add, the git commit with this message. And in this case, until you get to the end, because you're going to be working locally, you don't have to do the git push, but if you want to, you can. Okay, so now delete the username, rename to this. So again, there's very specific about what you need to do here, and then it gives you the hint, right, about what kind of variable, and it actually even says add a const, right, but it shows again my variable rule. So make sure there's no reference errors, right, commit with 2.2 done. Update the logic. So this is the part where we're now actually the math, right? So what are we looking for? So here's your decision, right? So it gives you some adding, add price to total every time it's clicked. We've already learned how to do that with the compound operator. Display the updated total, right? So this is, right, so your updated total here, right up here. And then coming back here, change text to green or black. Okay, else, right? So if it's over is when we change it to red, else you can change it back to here. Actually, would the else actually do this? Change to green, append over. Oh, interesting. Maybe not. That actually, I should have checked that. That'll be interesting. Matter of fact, hold on. Let me look at mine real quick. Okay, sorry. Something came on the window. I thought it wasn't working. It is. All right. So actually, no, this else, you can go ahead. You need to have it coded in there just so you know how to code it. But really, this is set on the HTML when the page is loaded. And so we don't really have, because we're starting in that, right? So here we're starting here. So in this case, we would never actually use that else. But I still want you to code it just for the experience of knowing how to do it, okay? Make sure it updates correctly, behaves as expected, commit your work. Now, update your event listener, right? Ensure that the is attached to the new variable name, the button variable name, and then commit here. And now I've given you some hints, right, to where if you get stuck, right, so let's say you see this, what happens here? So this just gives you some hints at the end, okay? All right, so, and also reach out for help, because I did test this, but I probably could have run through it again as well, but now you at least know what the output that you're looking for is. All right, so now, so work through that, do the commits, and before, right, now, here's the key is before you submit, right? So we remember when you're working locally, like, so right now I'm working locally. I wouldn't share this URL because nobody would be able to see it but me. And you'll see this in my content in a minute. But I just want you to know you actually have to do on your last commit, or if you do it every time, you actually have to push that out to GitHub. Okay. So check your console. So before you do that, so make sure there's no errors on your console. Okay, make sure everything, and actually make sure it's working here. So if you make sure it's working here, once you push it to GitHub, you should be fine. Okay, but also test it there. Okay, now push to GitHub. This is what I was talking about. Update your URL in your browser. So now if I push to GitHub, in order to check it there, because what I've been doing is I'm doing local development, I'm working locally, or if you're working on CodeSpace, it is still local to you. But once you push it, then you'll want to go to the URL that we use for week 1. But in this case, you'll want to put week 2. And this is the URL that you will end up sharing in the post so that everybody can see your particular version of this, right? So copy the new URL, right, so by appending to with your repo name and paste it into a new tab, or better yet, into an incognito window. This is actually a really good idea, right? So incognito window is another way to make sure it works. Does it load? Or this is what I was saying before. If you paste a 127, it won't work. This only is for your machine. I can't grade it, and nobody else can see it. Okay? Now, how am I grading this, right? Your post. In your reply, post your URL. If it works, tell us briefly, right? So you test it, but in your reply, tell us briefly your experience with this refactor. If you got stuck, you can use this post to ask a specific question or for help. And again, if you're not getting it immediately, this is where you take the next step to reach out, right? Now you can include your code link, but in this case, and we should all at this point know how to actually, even if you went to, and I think I already have, let me see if I still have mine from last time. And I would say Rio, and then I would say, is it C? I say, let's see if I have it out there. Oh, different one. Okay, so I think it's because I have a couple of repos. So hold on, let me find mine. Right. So this is just this is week 1. I don't push by week 2 because the idea is not to give you the answer. But in this case, if you were looking at somebody else's, you opened up their link, you could right click, hit inspect, and actually go into the sources in order to look at their code. Okay. So when I said here, I just realized that oh, what was I saying, right? Include a link to your code. You actually don't have to do that. I'm going to actually take that off, right? But you can tell us in your post what you're running into, okay? So 20 points for that. And then functionality, does your URL load the correct page, right? And produce the expected output? And did you have all the commits required? That should just be period. So what I mean by that is on the instruction, I gave step, and these are all commit messages. So when I look at your code, that's what I should see. Now, code quality, did you successfully implement the required changes, meaning the correct variables, the function structure, right, and all that? So that's part of what I'll look for. And then code review. So this is where you're going to look at another student's code. And don't just say, good job, open their URL code and review it and comment on something specific you found interesting or something you learned from their approach. Okay, so again, when you hit reply here, right, this is where you'll post URL and tell us briefly your experience of this refactor. Okay, so remember, this is where we're taking what we're learning and we're actually seeing how well we can translate it. And it really is important to know that you are in a community of other learners and people who are here to support you. So, don't turn to AI first. Again, if you're working right at the due date, it doesn't give you much of a chance to get help. If you do use AI, just be honest about it. But also, if you're using code outside of the course, it will really affect your grade. So don't do that. All right, hope this helps you understand what you need. And then I will probably in week 3 highlight good examples of here as far as a solution goes. Okay, talk to you later.